This is episode 11 of the Triathlete Hour. I'm your host, Kelly O'Mara, editor-in-chief of Triathlete magazine. This week, we're going to start by talking to someone a little different. The number one ranked Zwift rider in the world, Holden Comeau, talks to us about everything that goes into making e-racing fair and what he thinks about Ironman's announcement that they'll be awarding slots to the 70.3 World Championships via a series of virtual races. How will that work? And what are the issues? Then we chat with Olympian Ben Kanute. The second place finisher at 70.3 Worlds tells us which is harder, 70.3s or ITU. And what mistakes did he make when he moved up in distance? Plus, his puppy interrupts us a few times. So be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. All this after a short break. If you've been paying attention to what the pros are doing, then you've probably heard about Whoop. Whoop is a fitness wearable that provides personalized insights on how recovered you are and how much stress you put your body through during the day. Each day when you get up, Whoop gives you a recovery score based on your sleep, resting heart rate, and heart rate variability. And the way it works is you wear the Whoop band around your wrist all day. And don't worry, it's 100% waterproof. It even tracks your heart rate while you're swimming. You can then analyze your activity and recovery levels in the app. And you can use features like Strain Coach, which gives you target workout exertion goals tailored to your body's recovery for that day. You can even set to tell you when you've hit your target strain effort for the day, like, okay, that was good, now you can stop. There's also a built-in sleep coach, which lets you know how much sleep you should be getting based on your expected activity level for the next day. And it tracks all your different sleep cycles. Whoop is offering 15% off right now with the code TRIATHLETE at checkout. Go to Whoop, WHOOP.com and enter triathlete at checkout to save 15%. Sleep better, recover faster, and train smarter. Optimize your performance with Whoop today. All right, I'm here talking to Holden Comeau, who is the number one ranked Zwift rider in the world. Well, thanks for joining us. And can you tell me what that means?
The number one ranked Zwift rider, racer, I guess, in the world. And I should, I'm super specific. So okay. I'm currently ranked number 7, I think. I had been number 1 for a couple months, but those rankings are always in flux. I think that's sort of the point. Everyone who races on Zwift, at least the most passionate and dedicated racers, are sort of self-enter and self-select themselves into this ranking system. And just based on your finish, the strength of field in a given race, you are allocated a certain number of points that ultimately lower is better on the rankings list. So you're constantly dropping your overall score. And that's just all tallied up in a database. And I think there's about, last time I checked, just over 100,000 people who are entered in this list worldwide. I think over the winter, I was ranked first, I think, for about 4 months consecutively. And then over this last couple months, actually, this past month, I've let that slip down a little bit. I've been doing some different types of races that haven't allowed me to stay on top of the rankings.
Oh man, oh no. I think, so to make sure I get this right, because I think some of our audience will be a little confused. This isn't just everyone who goes on Zwift. You have to be part of like a very specific kind of like sign up for a specific system to be ranked, right?
Right. Yeah. People I think experience Zwift in a lot of different ways. I think that's why it's so much fun. It's sort of just this open world, and you can do whatever you want on Zwift. You can just go and log in and ride and mess around. You can go meet up with some friends if you want. You can join an organized group ride, and then ultimately, what I've gotten really into, you can join the racing community. And there's a few different ways to engage in racing. The first way is to just sign up for any race that's hosted on Zwift, and you do that via their mobile app. They've got a little phone app that you can go in and just find a race that's sort of happening all the time. Every 15 minutes, there's some type of race going off. And you can just enter those to go a step deeper, I think. There's a third-party website that is very closely connected with Zwift, but it is not Zwift. That website's called zwiftpower.com. And that is definitely the de facto results database and website.
Okay.
It's where you can go to see all of your own historic race results from Zwift, but also all of your competitors and anyone you've ever raced before. So every race that's ever contested on Zwift is basically stored in Zwift Power. And when you start a Zwift Power account or you opt into their service, that is definitely taking that next step of calling yourself a more committed or
more serious, right?
Racer.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So how did you get involved? Because I know you swam collegiately in college, you raced as a pro triathlete for a long time, like on the ITU circuit, and now you pretty much ride exclusively indoors, right? I read somewhere you had it written outside in a long time.
That's exactly true. Yeah.
How did you get involved in all this? Like, how did that even, happen?
Yeah, I finished triathlon about eight or 9 years ago, and yeah, I raced. I think it was best at Olympic distance. Tried some ITU stuff. I did a few Continental Cups and got pretty decent at those races. But then as I got older, I kept on going further and further. And then I had my first kid, my son was born. I started a company, an analytics company, and things just weren't progressing for me as an athlete anymore. My interests were somewhere elsewhere, I guess. So I stopped racing and training sort of cold turkey and went for about 2 years of doing nothing athletically. And that was right around the time where I was starting the company. So I was definitely all in and all my attention was just on that. But after about 2 years of doing nothing, I started to get a little anxious and I'd gained some weight. So I started running again. And over the winter, I didn't want to keep running when it was cold outside. So my business partner actually turned me on to Zwift as a way to stay fit over the winters. And that's really how I started. I just jumped on for some exercise. I didn't really start racing on Zwift until the first 2 winters were sort of under my belt. And then I discovered the racing stuff. And really what has kept me interested in it, it's just fits really well with my life. I run a company. I've got now 2 kids and my wife. I'm kind of busy, and Zwift just gives me the flexibility to get my workouts and my racing in. And I can do that early in the morning before the kids wake up. It's kind of perfect. So yeah, that's really what got me hooked. I think I won the national championship last year. And
the Zwift national championship, to be clear, right? Like,
that's right.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And so, yeah, they had the Zwift held the national championship. It was open to anyone who wanted to join it. You could just join it. I had joined a team a couple weeks prior to that, and we're mostly Americans on the team. That was a huge advantage because we fielded, one of the largest teams in the race. And yeah, it was a great experience, and it was a big race. I'm a sprinter. And it came down to a big pack sprint on the end, and I won. And it was thrilling. And no joke, I feel like this is my third athletic career. I was a swimmer, like you said, and then I was a triathlete, and now I'm 42 now. I was 41 when I won the national championship, and I really feel as though that was the best athletic moment of my life. It was unbelievable, and I was in my basement,
right, like by yourself. Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think you're at like I think you've like skipped a few levels past like a lot of my understanding of virtual racing and how it works, because obviously that's an elite level, a pro level almost, which is why you and I started talking, because e-racing is getting so big right now, kind of accelerated with the quarantine. And Ironman announced last week that they would be, they have a virtual race series. that uses Ruby, not Zwift, similar platform for those who don't know, but some key differences. And they announced last week that they would be awarding slots to 70.3 Worlds in real life via the virtual race series, which obviously raised a lot of questions for people who have never, who have never won a national championship, don't even know that's a thing. And so you and I started talking because what are some of the issues then that come into play when you start talking about virtual racing as a serious thing, like as more than just, for fun?
Yeah. Well, I think that I've mixed feelings about that decision.
I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. On the one hand, I think it's super exciting. I'm certainly biased. I'm all in on esports, virtual racing, and I think it's just only going to continue to get bigger and more important, and the sense of legitimacy that is continuing to grow around the sport is just doing that. It's continuing to grow. It's being sanctioned by the UCI this coming year, or is supposed to be. COVID's definitely slowed some things down, but the UCI announced last year that they were going to award a rainbow jersey and a world champion in esports, and that was going to be contested on the Zwift platform. So I think from a pro racing legitimacy standpoint, that's all coming. It's there. I want to see that happen. And the athletes who are racing in esports are a lot of that fitness and that skill is transferable. If you're fast in esports, you're going to be fast racing in real life, and vice versa. So it's exciting, the Ironman announcement. At the same time, it's really early days still, and I think it's really tricky to do something like this, to qualify an athlete in a virtual environment and expect that that's going to, or at least have the expectation that that's going to ultimately do what you want it to do in real life, which is, get the best athletes to the world championships in this instance.
Right.
I've found that esports is its own discipline. So the people who are best at virtual racing are not necessarily the people who are best at in real life racing. It can be a very different physiology, athlete type in general. So there's that component that I think comes into play as part of the challenge here. And the other piece to this is that I think athletes break the rules purposely.
You're trying to come up with a nice way to say how to regulate it, right? Like how to make sure people don't cheat.
Exactly. I think people cheat in real life,
right?
And people cheat in esports as well. I think the challenge with esports is that people are cheating and they don't realize it. I think most of the problems right now with esports are that it's kind of complicated, and you have to really go above and beyond to make sure that you are not cheating. Otherwise, you almost default to this state where you're sort of cheating inadvertently.
You mean to calibrate all your equipment and make sure it's all correct, and that you have all the most updated software and like all those tech things, right? That's what you're talking about.
Exactly. Okay. And it's really complicated. And if you don't go through all those processes, you can inadvertently get a big advantage. And it's really hard to normalize all of the competitors. So, my concern, I think everyone's concern with a program like this would be that there might be a lot of those instances where people might be going down this process and being awarded a world championship slot, and doing that based on a performance of equipment that might be improperly calibrated, just as an example.
Right.
And they might not even realize it, and then that becomes a pretty tricky, conversation to manage. And are you going to take that slot away from someone if it comes out that they had miscalibrated their equipment? And how do you determine if someone's telling the truth, if they did it on purpose or if they did it inadvertently? And it's challenging for sure.
So why don't you then just walk us through some of the things you have to do? Like when you won the national championship on Zwift, there is a whole set of rules that comes with that, right? I didn't read because it's long, but there's a whole Zwift e-cycling rule book. Why don't you walk us through some of the things that they do that, you were required to do to make sure it was fair and all that?
Yeah. Well, to tell you how quickly things are moving and how new this all is, when I won the national championship, there was some verification processes in place, and they, over the course of the last year, have been completely updated, and there's been significant advancements in how riders are now verified, and that's in 1 year's time.
Mm-hmm.
There's just been a massive change, and it continues to move so quickly. So I think from that perspective, I'll tell you sort of the current status, because I think that's the best. When I won nationals, it was sort of in this spirit. There just wasn't as much to work to do that goes into the verification. The first thing that is super important, particularly on Zwift, is that the riders' weight, their body weight, is accurately reflected in game. And I'm not sure how Ruvi handles that. I would assume there's like a necessity to enter your body weight. Mm-hmm. But that is really critical that gets updated on a regular basis to reflect your body weight at any given moment every day. So I race almost every day, and it fluctuates. My weight fluctuates, 5 pounds a week. It's up and down, and depending on the time of day, etc. But even a 3 to 5 pound weight fluctuation has a really significant performance change in the game. It really matters. So we developed a protocol, or there's this protocol in place. When I say we developed it, my team was actually part of developing the protocol, where we perform a live video. So we make a live video weighing ourselves, basically, and we weigh a fixed or a known weight, like a dumbbell, put that on the scale, take the dumbbell off, weigh ourselves, and then weigh ourselves one more time holding the dumbbell. And it takes about a minute to do. It's super quick. There's a few different places that you can share that live video. If you're just part of the community and you want to let your competitors know that you're legit and that you weigh what you say you weigh, there's a closed Facebook group that's got a couple thousand people in it, and you can post those live videos there. It's very, very closely admin regulated, so it's a safe place to put video. But as far as the verification process goes, that also gets sent into an oversight panel that regulates Zwift racing, and that's a group called ZADA, ZADA, which is a WADA-like entity that is independent of Zwift, and you send them data and videos of yourself, of weighing yourself, and they help to sort of manually dig through individual performances to validate people in different ways. So the weigh-in video is super important, and also really manual. That's not easy to do, like you said, for thousands of Ironman athletes.
Because this is like basically something you just do yourself, or for like the very elite races, right? This is not mass participation, everyone on Zwift or all the people doing the Ironman race, for example.
Yeah, this is a requirement for elite level or pro-am racing on Zwift. And there's, maybe 150 athletes who fall into that category. It's not
huge, right?
Yeah, it's not, the whole community doesn't need to do it. It is a requirement for pro level racing, but a lot of community members still choose to do it as well because it's a best practice. Okay. I think these are there's more to this that I can go into detail, but these are the steps that need to be taken at the pro level of esports in order to make sure that the people who are racing are doing it fairly. And, that is important for pro level racing, but it really is important anytime there's a need to validate performance on esports. I think this World Championship qualifier is a perfect instance of that. If you need to validate rider performances, they're gonna need to go into this kind of detail,
right?
Or everyone's going to need to get comfortable with the fact that there could be some gray area around these performances, and I think that's okay too. But that's the point. It's if there's a need to go into this validation process, you sort of have to go pretty deep in order to make sure everyone's participating fairly. So.
Got it. So there are these, I mean, I've seen them before. I've seen people do the video weigh-ins before their, like the Pro Tri Series Zwift races every week. They've all started videoing themselves before. There's also like calibrate, there's very specific rules about calibrating and having backup sources of data. I know there are very specific rules about, all that kind of stuff. At the very, very top level of Zwift, World Championships, they'll even have everybody in the same room, right? Like riding their trainers in a gym or whatever to literally see everyone.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where the future is going to be, particularly for the UCI World Championships and even future national championship events. I think will all be held in the same room on the same equipment that has all been, calibrated by a single person or using the same calibration process. Until then, there really isn't until you get up to that level, you have to rely on every individual sort of going through this process. Like you said, the dual recording piece is really important. Having 2 power meters, it's not a perfect system, and even that can be gamed and cheated a bit, but when you go through these steps and take more and more steps to prove that what you're doing is what you're doing, it sort of makes it increasingly difficult for people who want to cheat. It just adds layers of friction to that whole process. So having two power meters, you record your race using 2 different power sources. One power source could be your smart trainer, and that is what you send into the game. The other is, your crank-based or pedal-based power meter, and that gets sent to a Garmin or something. And then you can take those 2 power files and compare them after it's over and see if, they're within a certain degree of separation of one another, just to see if there's any issues. I've been dual recording power meters for the last 2 years. I've gone through a couple different power meters. I've had like 7 different smart trainers. And, with that long history of data now, it's actually pretty interesting to see. You can, with 7 different trainers with multiple power meters, and everything's all pretty much lining up.
Really?
You get a great like bio passport almost, or data passport. You can see this long trail of history with data that has remained relatively consistent over the last couple of years.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you can't just be like, oh, I'm not slow. When you're slow on one day and you just are like, oh, it's my power meter, it's acting up. You can't say that. You have all this data. It's you. Yeah. It sounds like all this stuff though is very complex and obviously doable for an elite level, but would be very hard at a mass level. And I guess that's kind of I don't know if it's our last question, but sort of the direction I'm going here is this all possible at a mass level participation right now? Like, given what we can do now?
Yeah, I think I've sort of spoken from wearing this hat of being like a spokesperson for esports.
Right.
I want to see, and I want to make sure that that esports continues to grow in the right direction, and that it's not compromised in any way, and that it becomes this awesome, exciting new discipline to cycling and triathlon. On the other hand, to answer this question, I look at this from just in response to everything that's happening in the world right now. And as challenging and as difficult as it might be to award world championship slots based on a virtual performance because of all those reasons that we just went through, what else are we going to do right now? And I think it's more important to make sure that there's a world championship and have athletes going there. And I think that if that to me is the most important thing. So although it might not be perfect and it might be a bit of a compromise as far as the path to the world championship goes, I think that I'm all in favor, and I wish them the best. I think that makes me excited that there's this option at least,
right.
For continuing. I remember seeing the news when the Olympics were canceled, and I just couldn't imagine being in that position as an athlete where you're preparing for so long and then the rug's just ripped out from underneath you. So, that wearing that humanistic hat, I think it's great. I hope that, there surely will be some challenges, but there's going to be athletes racing in a world championship, and that's the most important thing.
I see what you're saying. Since we can't really have qualifying races right now, and this at least gives people a pathway, it's an option. And it could even be an option in the future for people who don't have races near them. This is a way to reach those people. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll especially be interesting if we ever get, virtual swimming. So, on what's the device? I forget the name of this, the dryland swimming devices. Right. Everyone with their bands in their living room, virtual swimming. It'll be great. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Holden, and for, giving us kind of a deep dive into the world of Zwift pro racing. Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And I think this is a super interesting topic, and it's fun to think about triathlon again. I've been so immersed in cycling and esports cycling in particular, and I was once a very passionate triathlete. So it's great to reconnect and think about Ironman. Great. Well, thank you. We're triathletes. We like to know how we're performing and how we could be better. We want all the data. And that's where Whoop comes in. Whoop is a fitness wearable that tracks your heart rate variability, sleep, activity levels, calories burned, and most importantly, recovery. Every day, Whoop gives you a recovery score based on how your body is recovered from the day before. So you can know if today's the day to tackle that huge workout or maybe adjust and pull back a little, take an extra nap. Whoop is offering 15% off right now with the code triathlete at checkout. Go to Whoop, WHOOP.com and enter triathlete at checkout to save 15%. Sleep better, recover better, and train better. Get faster right now with Whoop. All right, we're here today with Ben Kanute, the 2016 Olympian, second at 70.3 Worlds. Thanks for talking to us from hot Arizona, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So it's pretty hot there, right? It's like 110 right now or something like that?
Yeah, we just had a bit of a heat wave come through. So the past couple weeks have been pretty good, actually. Not too hot and some pretty decent training weather, but right now it's a lot of early mornings and avoiding the heat of the day.
I was going to say, what are your tips? Because you've been in Arizona forever, and I don't think of Arizona as like a great place to train, but you love it, so.
Yeah, it's fantastic, especially in the winter. And the summer, the best tip is to get out and go somewhere that's a little bit cooler. But it's the heat adaptations that you get are actually really good. And if you look at studies looking at like heat versus altitude, a lot of similar adaptations happen. So we just kind of adjust and work with it, do some indoor training in the middle of the day. Pool time is a little bit better to get in the water, and then running happens pretty early in the morning.
Okay. All right. And you've been quarantining with your wife and your dog, right? Is that right? And I think you have a full quarantine beard going too now.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Quarantining with my wife and our new puppy. And yeah, the beard's been kind of in some works before quarantine, but has really come into fruition here, I think.
And what's that? I mean, I've been trying to check in with everybody when we do this. Like, what's that been like for you? How has the quarantine situation been for you in Arizona? Is it back to normal now? Is it stressful? What's happening?
So Yeah, at first it was just kind of like a sitting around and waiting, trying to maintain fitness and be ready to race whenever racing came back. But now it's more of working on some of my weaknesses to come back a stronger athlete, and just kind of working around some of the different things that have been closed for the past month or so. But luckily in Arizona here, we've actually been able to get out quite a bit, and we're still taking it pretty seriously and quarantining quite a bit, but the state for the most part is kind of like doing a soft open or hard open where there's quite a few things that are back to normal and people are out and about. So I believe the pools are open and stuff here, but we're still just kind of taking it relaxed and easy since there's no immediate rush to get really, really fit for a race.
No, definitely not, right? What were your plans this year? I mean, I know like you've done the Olympics, you've done 70.3. What was your focus going to be this year? Were you trying for Tokyo? What happened?
Yeah, two main goals were to qualify for Tokyo and win a medal on the mixed relay, and then try and win the 70.3 World Championship. So
Oh, wow.
I was going to start off my season at the Sarasota World Cup and go do an exhibition race for the Super League racing, and then the following weekend go and qualify for the half Ironman World Champs in Oceanside. But obviously that's all been pushed back. So I had some other races in there like St. Anthony's and of course Escape from Alcatraz to try and have my fourth win in a row there. But really now it's just kind of waiting and seeing when races start popping back up.
Yeah, so I guess you have two situations there. You know that the Olympics are happening at a set time next year, but 70.3 Worlds, they haven't set a date yet for it. They like said it's postponed, but which one's more stressful, like knowing or not knowing?
That's a good question. I think that, knowing you get to formulate a plan and there's more clarity in that. So for us, like we have a date now for the Olympics next year, and it's all about being prepared and pretty much having an extra year to be better than we are right now. And as for Worlds, I think that there's going to be a lot of races like this where it's just uncertain. So it's a little bit harder probably to not know, but we're kind of expecting, to be fit for a certain part of the season in the fall, just in case, races start getting, filling up the calendar more and more.
Right. And then being ready for like the spring 70.3, et cetera.
Exactly. Then it's taken probably the off season like we do a bit because I don't think I have really any huge races that I need to be fit for at this time in January, February. And we'll start back up. That March 1st date is always a pretty big start date for Olympic racing. Even in March, there's a lot of half Ironman racing. So we'll be targeting that and kind of resetting and hoping for a full year in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed. So you were saying you were going for a medal with the mixed relay. I feel like, why don't you, I don't know that everyone knows what mixed relay is. How did you kind of get into that? Is it fun? It looks like high stress.
I mean, in my opinion, it's one of my favorite races to do and to watch. It's just so exciting. So the format is everybody does a super sprint, so a 300-meter swim, right about an 8K bike, and then a 2K run. And it goes girl, guy, girl, guy. And yeah, it's pretty unique for triathlon because it's team format, and one little mistake could cost your team pretty majorly. There's a bunch of lead changes. Everybody's full gas the entire time. So I've had quite a bit of success in the mixed relay the past, I've been doing it pretty much since 2015, 14, something like that. And the U.S. team has won a bunch of medals. So I started to put myself forward as one of the main relay guys to try and qualify for 2020, as I wanted to go back, not just go back to the Olympics, but to try and win a medal in it. And the U.S. team is really strong, and there's a lot of strong athletes who could be on there. So that's kind of been the plan. But with Olympic qualification like that, being on the team, you still race the individual as well. It's kind of a 2-for-1.
Yeah, the way they're doing qualification, right, is that you can qualify automatically as an individual, but then they're also leaving open the possibility of picking people for the relay, right? Like that's kind of how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
So the bringing in this new event, like if we're talking on the Olympic level for everybody, it was we want to have another type of triathlon race, but they didn't want to they didn't have space for extra athletes. So you have to use still just your 2 or 3 allotted for the individual and the relay. And then for selecting the U.S. team, there's only a couple races to actually qualify automatically for, which was the test event in Rio this past year. And then now that it's going to be determined, and then it rolls down to the discretionary selection. And one of the main criteria that they're looking at is relay capability there.
Yeah, that's what Sarah True told me, was that's like a big focus, winning a medal. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've had so much success on the world championship level with this, and we're always competitive at any of the relay events, that I think that, a medal, not walking away with one, would be, I think, disappointing for the U.S. team, just with how strong our team has been the past few years.
That's awesome. You obviously started out on the ITU circuit, went to the Olympics, and then moved kind of over to 70.3. You're still doing both. Which one do you think is harder? Which do you like more? Does it come and go?
Oh, I mean, they both hurt in different ways. 70.3, I always say it's like this pain that slowly sneaks up on you, because you're kind of pacing yourself a little bit, even though it's moving towards almost like an Olympic style race with the intensity that people are racing it at. But the super sprint stuff on the other end of the spectrum, it's like right from the gun. It's all out and just hurts right away, just quick onset. So I enjoy them both, and I enjoy the variety of it overall. It's one of the things that keeps me motivated. And I mean, it's pretty unique to have somebody, I think, that dabbles in the super sprint all the way through up to the half Ironman. So I found it a nice challenge and a fun challenge. And I don't know if I can necessarily pick one that's either harder or more fun or my favorite, just since they're pretty different overall, and I like them for that difference.
You did some of the Super League races too, right?
Yeah, that's it's basically like a more intense relay, because they have multiple days of racing. The competition is super high, and it's pretty fun to kind of mix up the different order of the events and have these unique formats.
Yeah, if people don't know, they will change the order. They'll have you do a bunch in a row. They'll have you do rounds. They'll eliminate people. It's crazy. But it also looks like the NASCAR triathlon, and I keep wondering how you guys aren't terrified you're going to crash all the time, because it's so fast and so many circles.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's a technical aspect to it that adds to the excitement, and that short track racing, the risks involved with it, I think it makes it more fun for people to watch. I think that for us, you have to stay focused the entire time, and just like on the relay, anything that's super sprint, that's all out from the gun, any little mistake you make can affect your entire race. So I like that aspect to it a lot, where if you miss put on a shoe, or you don't come across the line right, or you aren't fully focused that entire race, that could be the difference of finishing on the podium or well back, versus some of the longer races, you have a little bit of time to make up for your mistakes, which is kind of good on its own. It's a fun way to race, but it's just, you have to be really, really focused on that short stuff.
Yeah, that just sounds really stressful to me. So let's talk about how you because you're one of those people who actually got started in triathlon as a kid, way back as a junior, came up through the ranks as a junior. I mean, usually when we talk to people, they found it later in life. You've just been doing it since you were 8. How did that happen? How did you kind of get into all that?
Yeah, so my dad found the sport first, and I remember watching him at races or in transition areas, doing the Chicago's, the Mrs. T's triathlon at the time. And they, my parents, along with a few others, we had this hot pocket of triathletes in the Chicagoland area out where we were living. And a lot of the parents got together and they organized a kids triathlon at the local health and wellness center. And that was my first real introduction to the sport when I was about 9 years old. And then the real kind of step up that I took that got me on the Olympic path was a few years later. The Multisport Madness Kids Triathlon team got developed by Keith Dixon, and that he took his swimming background and his experience with watching all of these club swim teams turn out Olympians. And triathlon was a relatively new Olympic sport. I think this was just after the 2004 Olympics. We're in 05-ish when this team formed, give or take. And he said, well, I want to do the same thing everybody's doing in swimming, but let's do it with this pretty new sport that we have, triathlon, and let's try and get some Olympians. And so that was kind of the vision that he had. And, the parents played a huge role in being able to make that happen. And we just got exposed to this draft legal triathlon at a relatively young age. And I kept going back to it. I loved it. The team aspect was great. And it got to take me to some really cool places, starting with around the country and then starting to expand out to around the world.
It's ended up being that like the Chicago suburbs are kind of a hotbed for junior triathlon now, right? Like that just has happened since then, kind of with that club.
That team is still going on. And I think when you have someone or a team that's very successful, it kind of spreads out and it goes out to the surrounding area. And yeah, the Midwest turned out, multiple good teams. You have the Z3 triathlon team as well, based out of Iowa. And there's multiple. I know there are ones based up in Wisconsin and Indiana and all around the Chicagoland area. So it's really cool to see. And now I know, like back in the day, I don't think we were really filling out too many start lists, or we were just starting to as the years went on. And now I know there's so many different races to like qualify to just get into nationals. So it's definitely grown a lot, which is super great to see.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But then obviously we don't have, or at the time, there was not an option to do triathlon in college. So you had to kind of make that work, right? Because you went to University of Arizona, regular college student, not an NCAA athlete, right?
Yeah, so I had a lot of help from quite a few different people, but my mom especially, in choosing the right college. And I had a few different things that I wanted when I went there. Was one, to study some sort of exercise physiology, and have a degree in that. And then I wanted a big college university experience, and then also to be able to train for triathlon, and was going to kind of put myself all in on that, because I had never really just focused on triathlon. It was always doing like a high school sport or another club sport, and was just going to be fully focused in. And we looked coast to coast, a bunch of different schools, and settled on Tucson, Arizona, because it kind of had the whole package there of a good place to train in the winter, big university feel, and good academics. So really kind of honed in on that and took it upon myself I had a coach going into college who I would communicate with and get my workouts from and organize my classes. And luckily I fell into like a really good club team at the University of Arizona. But that wasn't my original plan, actually. Like I was going to maybe do a little bit, but there was actually a pretty talented group of guys who were at that school racing, who I got to train with a little bit. But I mean, ever since kind of my maybe junior, senior year of high school into college and everything, I've done a pretty individualized plan and done quite a bit of training, on my own, and then brought in people kind of as I saw fit or as it worked out.
So just to make sure I understand this, though, like you were not an NCAA athlete, though. So even though you were off doing like ITU races and stuff in college, you had to sort all the logistics out yourself, right? Like you had to tell your teacher, like, hey, I'm going to fly and go do this race. Like I might miss class, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been dealing with that since grade school and even into high school and everything. So I was pretty well versed in how to deal with professors and teachers. And for the most part, I got pretty lucky with teachers who were understanding. But you're right. Like there was no NCAA sport. They had tried to do a little like triathlon specific program along the way, but nothing really stuck until the women's triathlon became an NCAA sport. And thankfully I had a lot of good mentors along the way to help me out, help guide me. And when I was in college, like I didn't get my pro card or take my elite license until after my freshman year. And USAT was the ones who kind of pushed me to do that and gave me the opportunity to race in Europe for a month and do 4 races in 4 weekends, like all different formats, World Cups and Continental Cups. And that's what really set the standard for me and set the bar for what it took to be a professional triathlete.
Oh, really? Okay. It sounds like a very educational college experience.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot. It's I think a lot of times it's shocking for high school students to have a very structured life, very structured school schedule and workout schedule. And then all of a sudden you go to college and everything is like a blank book, like a blank page. You have to create everything yourself, which, is really great. It taught me, like, I'd known how to work hard for a while, but it taught me really how to work smart. And it was a great experience, and was actually able to get it done relatively early in 3 years so that I could focus on qualifying for the 2016 Olympics.
Oh, that's awesome. And then you obviously worked your way up through the ITU ranks. And I mean, a lot of, like, our general audience, we're used to age group races. You like sign up, you go, it's a big, but the ITU ranks, working your way up is kind of a totally different thing. You're like flying all over the world. You're like scrapping to get by, right? What's hardest about all that?
Yeah. So from the beginning, like I said, I had some good mentors. So I had people kind of whispering in my ear saying, like, hey, treat yourself like a business, like work the business side. So USAT is big on helping you start out. And even as you qualify for national teams and stuff, they're all very good about funding and all of that. And then it's kind of like a game on your own. Like, you have to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a good way, building your brand. And that helps, kind of front the costs a little bit then too. But yeah, it's a lot of planning. You have some guidance from some people, but it's at the beginning, it's pretty difficult to like break through. You have to go and race Continental Cups and get points to race World Cups and then WTS races. And it's on the surface, a very complicated system with ITU points, Olympic points, WTS points. So there's a lot of different point systems in there. But like, once you get into it, like, it starts to be a little bit more intuitive, aside from a few like nuancy things. But I mean, basically, if you perform well, you keep moving up the ranks. I was always trying to just focus on like having my best race overall, and that usually paid off for me. Okay,
so but you think at this, because I was going to say I do not understand the system, but you're saying that you understand the point system, you feel good about it now.
Yeah, so I mean, after doing it for a number of years, like, you get into a rhythm of it, and I mean, I could probably teach a crash course, like very basic level, just to understand the points. But after you go through, and you start to notice too, like, if you do well at a race, you see a certain amount of points, and it's always a little bit under review and stuff. But I mean, in general, as long as you're doing well, like, you're seeing yourself move up the list, and that's motivating, and you get to the next race and you keep focusing on that. And as you're going through it, like, you might have to teach yourself a little bit, but there's always people along the way who kind of help you out, and you ask questions and you're like, I don't understand this point system, and somebody's always there, like, able to help you out a little bit.
That's good. When you were like doing the like sleeping on couches, flying all over the world to get points, what was like the craziest situation you ended up in?
I mean, I have some good travel stories. I never really had to crash too much on anybody's couch, but I mean, there was a time, there's a story that I always tell, that I was in Turkey doing a World Cup, and man, our flight got canceled at like midnight after waiting around for a while. And there was a group of us, and this is the Spark Notes version a little bit. We ended up bartering for a number of taxis to take us to the other airport to try and get tickets for another flight to beat the bus of people that they were going to get on this bus to send over to that airport. And I was like alone with all the bikes, and some other people were all in other taxis, and I'm trying not to fall asleep to get there. So that was really crazy. And that was to go from Turkey to then all the way to Mexico, to Cozumel, for the next World Cup. So it was like this super long, crazy travel. Eventually everything worked out okay, but just like a crazy story in the middle of the night, driving in taxis to the next airport in Turkey.
And you're bartering in Turkish.
Yeah. Exactly. Just like, here's $500, like, take all 6 of us plus our bikes to the next airport. And they all talked, and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll do that.
I mean, a lot of the ITU athletes, though, they spend a lot of time traveling because they're in like international training squads, but you mostly stay in Arizona, right? Like, you pretty much are on your own. You don't really like have a squad.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a squad, like I said, when I was on the kids team growing up. And for the time, like, that was awesome for me. And then after that, I just found that I hadn't located a squad that was, fit my specifications for what I wanted. And having a home base for me is pretty important. And I feel like I always do my best when I'm able to put in a training block, either with it's with my coach who's nearby, relatively close, or I have a home base to go back to. And I give kudos to the people who are able to uproot their lives and kind of live out of a suitcase for 9 months out of the year, because I mean, I had trouble doing that the couple of times I went to Europe and lived just out of a suitcase for 2 to 3 months. So
Right.
I found having like some routes really helped me perform.
And even, sorry.
Sorry, I'm dealing with a puppy who's like trying to attack. He'll probably pop on the screen. He's still in his biting, teething stage. So
Oh, man.
balancing him.
And you guys got that for a quarantine puppy, or?
Well, we had planned on it beforehand. It was actually like an early birthday present for my wife.
Okay.
And yeah, we got him about a week early because everything was starting to shut down. So we took an extra car ride real quick to go pick him up a week early before we weren't able to.
Like, oh man, they say that all the dogs and cats adopted during quarantine are going to have a hard time adjusting when everyone goes back to work. But I guess you're like normal situation. He'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we try and leave him because I think at the beginning he had a little bit of separation anxiety, but we've made sure to like kind of separate ourselves from him every so often so that he doesn't get used to us only being here all the time. So
it's probably good.
We've tried to account for that.
Talking about Arizona, even, I mean, you were pretty like, I think of you as Arizona all the way through, but like, even when you qualified for Rio, you didn't fly out to Rio till like a few days in, and you threw yourself your own opening ceremony, right? Like in your neighborhood. I remember these videos. That was hilarious.
Yeah, so at that time I was working with a different coach, and we did an altitude camp where he was in Santa Fe, so I was there for a little bit, but finished up in Flagstaff, Arizona, because I'd moved back to Tucson at the time. And yeah, it was a good way to escape the heat and get some altitude training. And the plan for the entire team was not to go out until about a week before the games, before our race. So we did end up missing the opening ceremony, and that was just something we quickly threw together from our like Airbnb and some of the guys, the younger guys I was training with. And yeah, ended up being kind of going off a little bit viral. And it was just kind of something fun to do and to participate in while we were just still home training.
Right. Which is, I mean, yeah, part of the Olympics is, right, doing all the crazy stuff. And you've been working on qualifying for the Olympics, like you said, you know, since high school, since you were a kid. And you finally nailed it, right? At like the last qualification race. It was pretty epic, I think, right? What was that like to be like, no, this was it?
Thanks. That actually was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole Olympic journey. Like I always say, like the Olympics was awesome. Racing in Rio and against like the best competition in the world with the crowds is always an amazing experience. But at that race in Yokohama, with how everything was panning out, like I felt, and I think a lot of people might have felt like, oh, his chance was to qualify at the test event on the course because it's a ocean swim, hilly bike, pretty flat run. Like it's kind of a strongman's course a little bit, and there's probably going to be a breakaway. And I just had a terrible race. And in Yokohama, it was the opposite. It's still like it's a 2-loop swim, but usually wetsuit and a pretty like relatively slow bike. Overall, it's not known for being a really hard bike. And then just a fast kind of runner's race almost.
Oh, okay.
And there were a number of guys on the team who on paper ran faster than me. And I don't think many people had me picked to qualify for an Olympic Games. And I think I just went in with the right mindset, had a goal that I wanted to hit, and I crossed the line. And we were talking about ITU points earlier. Well, USAT had their own point system to help qualify for that Olympics, to help select the team in their non-discretionary way to make sure it was fair. And I knew about where I needed to finish, but it wasn't anticlimactic because I like kind of went over. I'm like, that was it, right? Like those points, like I did the math correctly, right? Like I qualified for the team and didn't quite have like a straight answer, but pretty soon after got a straight answer and was like calling my parents, my coach, and was just like over the moon about it.
Oh, so you had to wait for them to like double check.
Like, there was a bit of a like I was like kind of protecting myself because I knew that it was like that's how they had planned it, but I wasn't exactly sure like, oh, is that like, did I change the rules? Like I kind of guarded myself a little bit, but then it was like, no, that's definitely it. That's what did it. So that was just like one of my best runs. I feel like I had, like I stepped up to what I needed to do. And yeah, it was just awesome.
That's awesome. And you felt like it was all worth it then? All of the hard work, everything?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's like one goal gets checked off, and then you set up 5 more goals that you try and achieve. And yeah, it's a lot about the process too. And that's kind of like that race was that accumulation of all of that process and being able to reflect back on that.
Right. That makes sense. And then eventually, obviously, after Rio, you kind of started doing 70.3s. What made you want to do the half distance to go longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my strength is strength, and the longer racing has always been appealing to me, and I feel like that's kind of where kind of my better races will lie. I'm not as fleet-footed of a runner as some of these guys out there who run 29 minutes for a 10K off the bike.
Right.
Like, I could spend years and years and possibly get down there, but I have a kind of a lot of goals in triathlon, and winning a 70.3 world championship is one of them, and have really found that I've adapted to racing that half distance pretty well overall, and enjoy the racing a lot.
You were second one year to Javi, so that was pretty close. And it's getting really competitive. Like, that race at Nice this last year was crazy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, that race that I was second was that kind of culmination of a lot of things coming together for me. As a bit of an unknown name at that distance, and people let me go on the bike and thought I'd fade a lot. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to outrun or stay ahead of someone like Javi, but yeah, that was a great world championship debut, and it's only gotten more competitive since then, and it's great to see. It's really good for the sport.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And since you like longer, I guess I'm going to have to ask, are you going to go even longer? Is that coming?
Well, I think that's on the table, but I think we still have maybe a couple years, or I'll keep people guessing on when my debut will be. So we'll see about it, but it's definitely on my radar.
There are so many ITU guys moving up and dominating. Do you feel like it's like almost proof that, hey guys, the ITU guys are really good, really fast? Do you feel like they're better? Do you see what I'm saying here?
You're trying to bait me here. You're trying to make me make some enemies. I think that there are certain athletes from ITU who are obviously very incredible, and they make that jump really well. And I think other athletes from ITU, some struggle with the distance or nutrition a little bit at the beginning.
Sure.
And I think that the same thing can go for half Ironman. It's pretty rare that you see guys dropping down in distance, but it's definitely something that's been done, and people have tried and gone after that. So, yeah, I mean, overall, like, there's just so much competitive racing now. It's hard to say who's actually better. It's just triathlon is becoming more and more specialized. People are picking one distance and really becoming very, very, very good at that distance. And it's just taking a little bit longer in some cases, whereas others jump right across and have no issue. But it's becoming a very specialized sport. So it's kind of different to see people all over the place. Oh,
that's true. That's for sure. I think the specialization's good. I think it's actually made it a lot more interesting. So definitely. And as you moved up and had to figure out all that nutrition, and what were some of the biggest issues you found in moving up in distance?
Yeah, I think, maybe it's two things on the nutrition. One is making sure you get enough calories and enough so that you don't bonk during the race. And then the other is making sure that your stomach isn't upset, that you're not, throwing that up, or it's not all coming back. So finding that balance took a lot of experimenting overall. And it was kind of I think that I had a relatively easy time figuring it out because I erred on the safe side. But yeah, it took a little bit of training and overfueling on some workouts and underfueling on others before I kind of narrowed it in for what I find works.
But you thought the nutrition part was the hardest part about moving up in distance, not the training or anything else?
No, I mean, because I think for Olympic style racing, a lot of guys, we all train about 30 hours a week at our peak. And, some guys are a little more, some are a little less. It just kind of switched up how you did that training. Instead of some of the high intensity efforts, it's just a little bit more steady, or you're on the time trial bike a little bit more. And I already kind of dabbled in that a little bit with some of the Olympic distance racing, the non-draft stuff that I was doing. So some of it, like, it's just a little bit longer in some areas, but I didn't find it was like a dramatic change.
Okay. And have you tried, you have tried some of the new virtual racing, right? I know you did one of the Ironman VR races. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Is this the future? Are you going to keep at it?
I think it's a great thing right now, and I think it's a great thing to keep the sport going.
Right.
And it'll probably stick around because, I mean, they're just fun to do. I think we've seen that there's a lot of discrepancy in people racing virtually and outside, and some people are way better outside, and inside it's just a different beast. Like it's how much power can you put out, and there are some guys who are just really good at putting out power. So it's been interesting to watch the results from it all, but I found it fun and entertaining at the very least. And I know some people won't really touch it at all, and some people can't get enough of it. I think I'm probably somewhere in between. I always like a good race, but I'm trying to bide my time a little bit. I just love being outside and racing all of the traditional races that we've got going on, and just being out on the course and being able to go head to head with people. So I think I probably favor that a bit more, but definitely it's been a good training tool.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're not going nuts. Like some people with all of the race cancellations are doing like all the VR races, all the KOM attempts, like everything, but you're not really.
No, I've never been much of a KOM guy. I've never been much of like just a virtual racer or something like that. And I don't know, maybe it's something because it's just virtual or it's just a time. Like I can still push myself super hard. I train on my own a lot, but there's just something else about like going head to head with somebody who's right next to you, or standing on the start line next to everybody else. Like that's just kind of another level for me.
Yeah, I can get that. And I know I saw you at Kona one year doing the Kona Beer Mile. So is that also in your mix of events?
I think I outgrew that a little bit. No longer in college. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't think I can put down any beer miles anymore. So sticking to the mainstream racing nowadays.
To the regular.
Even that's for the young guys.
Okay. To the non-beer racing.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess, I mean, usually I ask people, like, what do they have planned this year? You know, where are you going this year? But right now it sounds like you're just kind of waiting to see what happens and all that.
Yeah, I've had some races that I've signed up for, like Oceanside, reschedule and have a date for that sort of thing. But yeah, honestly, right now it's just kind of taking it day by day, week by week, month by month to see, you know, where is the world at? Where's the state of racing at? And my coach and I are pretty adaptable overall. So we're just kind of biding our time and waiting for everything to start back up.
Yeah, I get that. That's what everybody's doing, right? So
yeah,
we've been finishing out with a Would You Rather the last couple of weeks. So here's my Would You Rather for you. Ready? Would you rather win the Olympics or win 70.3 Worlds?
You know, I probably could have picked that question. Over. I could have guessed that one was coming. It's a difficult one, but I think I'd say the Olympics. It's something that comes around like once every 4 years, and in this case, 5 years now. So with how much less racing there is for that, like I think it's a little bit more rare to have that. You can count almost on one hand the amount of male Olympic champions we've had. So I think I'll have to go with Olympic champion.
I guess it makes sense to me. So, well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Ben, and you know, good luck with everything as all this figures itself out.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Thanks to Ben and Holden and to our triathlete staff and to all of you for listening. Stay tuned later this week for the next episode of our training podcast, Fitter and Faster. You won't want to miss it. In the meantime, keep training and stay safe.